Mark Truex Jr.'s future remains uncertain for 2023. Kyle Larson responds to Denny Hamlin's tweet from this past week, and Erik Jones has begun discussions to return to petty GMS Motorsports in 2023. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start with paint schemes and sponsorship news first. Let's jump into those really quickly. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ty Gibbs' 2022 Bobby Labonte throwback scheme that we're going to see this weekend at the Darlington Throwback race. This, of course, is a throwback to Bobby Labonte's 2002 interstate battery scheme. This paint scheme is really good in my opinion. I really love this throwback scheme. They did a very solid job on it. It's kind of interesting. They had Ty Gibbs do an interstate batteries throwback, but of course, interstate batteries has sponsored Ty Gibbs. It's a nice looking paint scheme, and I'm definitely looking forward to see on the racetrack here this weekend at Darlington. The next throwback paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Reham's 2022 Dale Earnhardt throwback scheme that we're going to see this weekend at the Darlington Throwback race. This will be the first time that Josh Reham is in a 33 this season. This throwback paint scheme is really good in my opinion, except for one thing. I think they should have slanted the numbers a little bit. I think that's one thing that would have made the scheme look good, but also there's a possibility that they could get a lawsuit from it. So it's an alright looking throwback paint scheme in my opinion. I'm looking forward to see on the racetrack here this weekend at Darlington. The next paint scheme we're going to go ahead and take a look at is Akaneri Ogada's 2022 Mike Skinner throwback scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Darlington Throwback race. This is a throwback to his 2005, Mike Skinner's 2005 scheme that he ran when he drove for Bill Davis Racing. This is a very nice looking throwback in my opinion. I think he did a really solid job on it for him. I think it's a nice looking throwback, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack here this weekend at Darlington Throwback race. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Denny Hamlin's 2022 Denny Hamlin throwback scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Darlington. This, of course, is a throwback to Denny Hamlin's scheme when he won the 2016 Daytona 500. I love this paint scheme, in my opinion. I kind of wish it was kind of like the primary scheme that they were running for Denny Hamlin a little bit more. I really like it. They did an awesome job on it, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack here this weekend at Darlington. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Christopher Bell's 2022 Christopher Bell throwback scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Darlington. This, of course, is a throwback to Christopher Bell's 2017 Series XM scheme. This is a nice looking throwback as well, in my opinion. It's kind of lame that he's doing a throwback to himself from 5 years ago. He really hasn't done much in the Cup Series, really deserved to run a throwback, but I think overall it's a nice looking throwback, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack here this weekend at Darlington. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tyler Ankram's 2022 Mike Skinner throwback scheme that we're going to see this weekend at the Darlington Throwback race. This is a throwback, of course, to 2008 Mike Skinner's scheme. It's a nice looking throwback in my opinion. I think did a very solid and a really good job on it. I think that they've done an awesome job this year for Tory Racing, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at a Darlington Throwback race. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chase Purdy's 2022 Darrell Waltrip throwback scheme that we're going to see this weekend at the Darlington Throwback race. This is a throwback to Darrell Waltrip's 2004 Truck Series scheme when he drove in the Truck Series, and not the first time that we have seen this scheme when Spencer Davis ran it last year at the Throwback race. They did a really good job once again, similar to Spencer Davis's. I still think Spencer Davis's is better last year, but I still think it's a nice looking throwback. I think they did a really solid job on it, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack here this weekend at the Darlington Throwback race. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Joey Logano's 2022 Pennzoil throwback scheme to one of his late models that he used to run when he was a little kid that he'll be running this weekend at a Darlington Throwback race. I think they did an absolutely really good job on this throwback scheme. It's a very nice looking throwback. It's not my favorite one I've seen this year. I do think the shell throws it off just a little bit, but I think it's a nice looking throwback scheme, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the racetrack here at Darlington Throwback race. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Erik Jones' 2022 Bommarito scheme that we're going to see at the Worldwide Technology race. This has not been entirely confirmed for Petty GMS, but it's been in the preview, so this is what it's going to be. This looks absolutely incredible, and it's awesome to see that Bommarito is going to be sponsoring at Worldwide Technology Raceway. Bommarito is going to be having a big presence out of Worldwide Technology Raceway. Of course, Bommarito is from the St. Louis area, so it's really cool to see that, and I'm definitely looking forward to see this paint scheme out on the racetrack this season. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tanner Gray's 2022 Dead on Tools scheme that we're going to see this weekend, not this weekend, but throughout the 2022 season. Tanner Gray will have Dead on Tools, and also his brother Taylor Gray will have Dead on Tools throughout the season as well at this organization. It will be for multiple races. This looks really cool in my opinion. I think did a great and a very solid job in it, and like I said, I'm definitely looking forward to see it on the racetrack here this weekend, not this weekend, but throughout the 2022 season. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is AJ Allmendinger's 2022 Andy Sprouse and Custard scheme that we're going to see at the All-Star race. This is a very interesting paint scheme in my opinion. I think that Austin Dillon's scheme last year that he ran, I think is better than this one, but I will not say that this one is bad. It's actually a nice looking paint scheme. I think did a great job on it, and like I said, I'm definitely looking forward to see on the racetrack at the All-Star race. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jack Wood's 2022 Auto Parts for Less scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Darlington. This paint scheme is all right in my opinion. I kind of wish you were doing a throwback. I think every team should be required to do a throwback, but I think this overall does a really good job at one thing is the sponsorship utilization. I think it's a nice look at paint scheme, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack here this weekend at Darlington. And the final paint scheme as of now we're taking a look at is Ross Chastain's 2022 Worldwide Express scheme that we're going to see in the Truck Series for 4 races. We'll talk about Ross Chastain here later in this episode, but I think this absolutely looks really, really cool. It's cool to see that he's getting back with GMS Motorsports for a few races this year. I think it's a nice look at throwback, nice look at scheme in my opinion. Very excited to see these joining on the track, and I'm looking forward to seeing him back on the track. It's really cool to see, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Lynyrd Skynyrd. As it was revealed yesterday that Lynyrd Skynyrd is going to be performing a pre-race concert for the Coca-Cola 600. Lynyrd Skynyrd, known for songs like Sweet Home Alabama and Free Bird and Give Me 3 Steps, one of the legendary Southern rock bands from the 1970s. It was a band that has been around for a very, very long time, and they still continue to play to this day. They've not released many singles over the last like 30 or 40 years, but it's really cool to see that Lynyrd Skynyrd, hey, it's NASCAR, so it makes a ton of sense for have Lynyrd Skynyrd at your pre-race concerts, but it's most American thing to have Lynyrd Skynyrd. Really cool to see that Lynyrd Skynyrd is going to be going ahead and performing a pre-race concert. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Team Penske. As Team Penske this past week had their best driver in the race finish 26 being Ryan Blaney. This is the first race that the organization has had all 3 cars outside the top 25 in a non-super speed race since Martinsville 2015 in the fall, and this is according to Joseph Strigley. That's absolutely crazy, and if you remember the fall Martinsville race, that was a race where Brad Keselowski and Joey Logano crashed out in there. Matt Kenseth was also involved in both those incidents, but it just shows that Team Penske was absolutely horrendous. Ryan Blaney did get a stage win, so that definitely will help him in the points, but he ended up finishing 26th. Joey Logano was horrendous. He finished 29th, and Austin Cindric fell out of the race. Team Penske's got a lot of work to do, and it really, for them to run this bad, is not a good thing. Look, I know this is probably one time we're probably going to see them struggle. I do think they'll get their stuff together, but it's just absolutely crazy to me that Team Penske has absolutely struggled the way they did at this race. They've got a lot of work to do and a lot of recovery to do here throughout the season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Richard Petty. As Richard Petty was announced about an hour ago that he is going to be the honorary starter for the Goodyear 400. We're going to talk about Richard Petty later in this episode, but Richard Petty being the honorary starter is really, really cool. Now, let's hope that NASCAR does not get mad at him this time like they did in 2017 when he was the pace car driver, where they basically had the black flag him. It's really cool that probably the greatest driver in NASCAR history, one of the greatest drivers in NASCAR history, is going to be able to wave the green flag. That's really awesome to see, and I'm very excited to see that he is going to be waving the green flag. That's really, really awesome that they're allowing him to do that. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as the LW Wright, we're going to talk about the LW Wright podcast, as the LW Wright podcast is officially out from the Zine Vault podcast. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We talked about this earlier this week, but the LW Wright podcast is officially out. The Zine Vault guys and Rick Houston, who runs the Zine Vault podcast, he was able to find LW Wright. I cannot believe that when they've been searching this guy for such a long time, I cannot believe that they found LW Wright. It's absolutely insane to me that they found LW Wright. I don't think anybody saw this coming, and the fact that they were able to find LW Wright, I think is absolutely incredible. So that's really awesome for sure, and again, very exciting to see that they were able to find LW Wright. I think that's absolutely awesome and really cool to see that they were able to find LW Wright, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Daniel Suarez. Now, Daniel Suarez revealed on Twitter, I think on Friday, before we went to racing at Dover, that he had a broken toe or a really messed up toe. Now, it wasn't from a crash like Daniel Hemrick, because Daniel Hemrick was basically suffered a broken toe. Daniel Suarez basically had a broken toe from a workout. Now, Daniel Suarez was able to nurse it home to, I think, a top 15 finish, which is really impressive, all things considered. He was able to keep it on the lead lap all day long and got a very solid finish. I just hope that there's really no more issues that do come out from this, but it's good to see that Daniel Suarez was not basically bedridden and didn't have to basically sit out. He was able to continue racing. So it's good to see he's able to continue racing, and I'm glad there really weren't any more issues for him. It's just unfortunate what happened to him, but it does look like that he is okay, and he'll be able to continue racing, which is good to see, and was able to get a top 15 finish. That's really awesome. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about some Miami Grand Prix attendees that are going to be at the Miami GP this weekend. Like I just mentioned, Formula One is going to be hosting the first ever Miami GP, and a lot of big celebrities are going to be at this year's Miami GP. This includes LeBron James, Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, Pharrell, Dan Marino, David Beckham, James Corden, Serena and Venus Williams, and Wyclef Jean are among some of the people that are going to be at this event. I think there's going to be more celebrities that are going to be showing up, and there's a lot of reasons for this. One, Formula One has absolutely been growing in the United States, one of the fastest growing sports here in the United States, and there's just a lot of hype around Formula One. Now, tickets are absolutely insane, and of course, they have a fake marina at the track, but there's just a lot of hype around this event. Now, for those who are NASCAR fans that are wanting to tune into this, you're going to have to split screen it because for this year's race, it's going to be starting exactly at the same time as the NASCAR Cup Series race at Darlington, which is unfortunate because it is a Darlington throwback race. But I think it's going to be really exciting and a great thing to see. And again, I'm absolutely looking forward to the Miami GP, and again, I'm looking forward to it for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Pocono Goodyear test, as it was announced in no shocking fashion that the Pocono test that was supposed to take place for Goodyear has been postponed to May 10th and 11th. The three drivers that are expected to do that test are Eric Almirola for Ford, Daniel Suarez for Chevy, and Kyle Busch for Toyota will be doing this Pocono test. Originally, this test was supposed to take place this week, but because of the fact that they had to postpone it because of the race getting postponed, they basically had to hold off on the test, and there will be a tire test for Pocono. I'm very interested to see how this test is going to be, if the tires are going to be really good and hold up, if they're going to have to use trash compound or not for the Pocono race. If they do end up doing really, really good and the tire test goes well, we may not have to see the tire compound come into play, because Pocono is a much different track than any other track. So we'll have to wait and see what happens overall on that front, but it's absolutely kind of nuts to see that we basically will see a Pocono test coming up here really, really soon. It's really not nuts. I don't know why I said that, but it's kind of good to see that they're having a Pocono test for Goodyear. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to go ahead and talk about Tommy Joe Martins. As Tommy Joe Martins is going to be driving the 45 for Alpha Prime Racing this weekend here at Darlington. This will be Tommy Joe Martin's start, I think, first start really in a long time. I think his first start really since Vegas, if I'm not mistaken, or before that Auto Club. So it's been a little bit since Tommy Joe Martins has made his start here in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Tommy Joe Martins definitely has a lot of talent, so I do think his car will do really, really well. Of course, he'll have to make it into the show, which I think 2 cars are going to be going home for this event, so hopefully the 45 car does have pace. They've had a lot of bad finishes here, which is why they're so low in the owner's points right now. I think they've had speed to finish in the top 20 this year, but they've had a lot of mechanical problems. I think if Tommy Joe can make it into the show, it would not shock me if he does finish in the top 20 this week. And so we'll have to wait and see what happens, but it's great to see that Tommy Joe Martins is back into 45 this weekend for Alpha Prime Racing. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about JJ Yeley. And JJ Lee is going to drive the 15 for Rick Ware Racing this weekend at Darlington. This will be JJ Lee's, I think, 3rd or 4th start this year with this team, and he's been really impressive in the 2 starts he's had. He was pretty quick at Richmond. I think he was around a top 30 at Richmond, and was really, really fast at Bristol, contending for a top 20 before he had some issues in the race. Now, this 15 car, when it's had the good guys in the field like Ryan Preece and JJ Lee, it's done really well and contended for top 25s and even sometimes top 20s. JJ Lee has been definitely improving over the years, and it would not surprise me or shock me if JJ Lee does end up potentially getting maybe a top 20 this weekend. I know that's high expectations for a Rick Ware Racing car, but it seems like this 15 car right now is in a lot better position right now than the 51 car is for Cody Ware at the moment. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, but JJ Lee is going to be in the 15 this weekend for Rick Ware Racing. And now we're going to jump on to the next 3 of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Ross Chastain. As Ross Chastain is going to drive the 41 for Nice Motorsports this weekend at Darlington. Ross Chastain has already made one start this year with this team at Atlanta Motor Speedway, where he finished, I believe, 22nd or 23rd in the race. Ross Chastain will be in his car truck most likely for 6 races this year. Will be with Worldwide Express for 4 races this season, and we're going to see Ross Chastain behind the wheel of this truck. I think that he's capable of getting a win. I really think he could win one of these races. He's a good driver. He's having a great year in the Cup Series this year. He's having one of his career season in the Cup Series right now, and is doing absolutely impressive this year, regardless of what car he gets into. Would not shock if he wins a Truck Series race this year. I don't think it'll be this weekend, but we'll have to wait and see what happens, how he does. But I'm glad to see that he's back with this team this weekend in the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Tyler Reddick. As Tyler Reddick is going to drive the 48 for Big Machine Racing this weekend at Darlington. For the last couple weeks, Kaz Grala has been in the 48 car. He did crash out at he did crash out at Talladega. I think he finished in the top 20 at Dover, if I'm not mistaken. I remember correctly. I have to check the results later, but I think he had a decent run at Dover. Now, one thing to note is that there are expected to be some Cup guys that are going to be in this 48 car, as Big Machine Racing is trying to evaluate where their program is at currently at the moment, and that's why they're bringing Cup guys like Tyler Reddick in the series. I would expect you're going to see guys like Austin Dillon in this car at some point. I'm going to expect some guys like Erik Jones maybe to get in this car. I think you're going to see a lot of our Richard Childress group, as part of that Richard Childress family, probably getting behind the wheel of this car. I think Tyler Reddick, I know this car has not been fast, but I think Tyler Reddick legitimately could get a top 10 finish or even a chance to win this race. I know there's high expectations for Big Machine Racing, but we've seen Tyler Reddick contend with the 23 car, and we're coming to a track where I think Tyler Reddick could genuinely win this weekend, not just in the Xfinity Series, but the Cup Series. So I think he's got a shot at winning this weekend, and it would not surprise me if he does pick up the overall victory this weekend here in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, or even the Cup Series as well for that matter. But I think he's got a shot at getting it done. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Porsche and Audi. As it's been officially confirmed that Porsche and Audi are going to be joining Formula One when the new stuff comes in 2025 or 2026. We talked about this weeks ago on the channel that Porsche and Audi have been rumored for a long time that they were going to be joining Formula One, but now we have official confirmation that they are going to be joining Formula One. Porsche is trying to get hooked up with Red Bull currently at the moment. It's very possible Red Bull could jump away from Honda. I believe that Honda and Red Bull have a contract right now through 2024. They signed an extension for a few years, so they will be a few years before they can make that jump over to try to get a work with Red Bull, but it's very possible they could work with Red Bull. Audi is trying to get a deal done with McLaren right now. They're basically asking $500 million to work with McLaren, but there's also been talk right now that they may just part ways and may not even happen where they work with McLaren. So I think McLaren wants to be its own branding, and they still have the power plant with Mercedes right now, and they don't want to make that jump away to Audi, but you look how much bad McLaren is performing, maybe they would have to make that choice. I think it is really awesome that Porsche and Audi are looking to jump into the series. They can't start their own factory team right now because there's no possibility right now at the moment of teams expanding to 21 or 22. It's basically another extra team, 11th organization. I know there's been rumors about that, but it's not going to be happening. But I do think it is overall really, really awesome to see that Porsche and Audi are going to be going ahead and joining Formula One. They've been given the go, and we'll see what teams they go with. I think Porsche will join up with Red Bull. I think it will happen there. But the question right now is, will Audi join with McLaren? That's one thing to watch going forward here in the foreseeable future. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about 2023 Speedways. Now, fellow NASCAR YouTuber Jarrett Lundberg, also known as the Iceberg, posted out a Speedweek schedule on Twitter here yesterday. It shows that the Speedweek schedule is very, very similar to last year. So February 15th is going to be the qualifying, where qualifying happens on that Tuesday or that Wednesday. Then that Thursday on the 16th is going to be when you're going to see the duels happen. Then the 17th on that Friday is going to be when the Truck Series race happens. Then the 18th will be the ARCA and the Xfinity Series race. And the Cup Series race at Daytona 500, the first race of the year, is going to be on February 19th. Right now, it's unclear if the Los Angeles Coliseum is going to be back at this time for 2023. They are talking about maybe going abroad for 2023. There's also talking about maybe returning to the Los Angeles Coliseum here in the future. That's one thing that we're going to have to watch. But like I said, the schedule is very similar to last year. But again, anything could change at the moment. This is basically the renewals. He's been going there for the last couple of years. So this is what you get when you do have renewals for Daytona. Again, it's unclear at the moment if this is what the rate is going to be, if this is officially what it's going to be when the official time comes out. But to me, in my honest opinion, I kind of hope that this is when it does come out, because I think that would be really, really awesome. So we'll generally wait to see what happens in regards to that, but it does look like this could be the 2023 Speed Week schedule, but we'll have to wait for things to be determined going forward, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about IndyCar in Barber. As this past race at Sunday, we had the IndyCar race at Barber for the Cup Series race took place at Barber Motors, not Barber, Cup Series at Dover. We had the IndyCar race at Barber Motorsports Park. Pat O'Ward picked up the victory this weekend. This is his first win of 2022. And if you're really a confidence booster, I think, for Pat O'Ward, considering that this year for him has not been really, really good. Rinus VeeKay pretty much dominated most of this race. He had the car to beat most of the day, but he had lost a lot of time on pit road and got passed late by Pat O'Ward and Alex Palou. Rinus ended up still getting a podium position, but what could have been for Rinus VeeKay to pick up his second career IndyCar victory? Like I said, this huge confidence booster for Pat O'Ward. On the last couple laps of the race, there was basically some major issues between Romain Grosjean and Graham Rahal. Graham was not very happy on the radio for Romain Grosjean after the race. In his post-race interview, he was not very happy as well. To me, it's contact. I think Romain was a little bit crazy, and we've seen how his reputation is in Formula One, and I think that kind of laid over into the IndyCar side of things. But to me, I think it's really, really awesome to see that the race, I think the race is okay, in my opinion. There was some good racing throughout the field and stuff. It's very difficult to pass, but I think tire strategy made the race really, really intriguing. And congratulations to Pat O'Ward and McLaren on picking up their first victory of 2022. It's good to see Pat O'Ward, and this really will probably set those talks away from him leaving the team. I think he will be back with McLaren, McLaren SP in 2023. We'll wait to see what happens, but I think he goes back, and huge win for Pat O'Ward this weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson was racing at the World of Outlaws late model race and was also racing the sprint car race, and he basically got penalized and was sent to the back and actually drove his way up to second and was contending for the victory in the race in the late model event. I think he also almost contended for the victory in the sprint car race, but Kyle Larson ended up finishing second, had a tire go down. Jonathan Davenport was able to win the late model event. After the race, Kyle Larson was outspokenly not happy. He was not happy that he got sent to the tail because they did not give him the horn. They did not send him at the right position and basically sent him to the tail end of the field, drove his way up, and basically criticized the World of Outlaws officiating crew for the situation. Basically says that's why some of the owners like Mark Rush and some of the other owners are leaving the World of Outlaws late model series. I absolutely do not blame Kyle Larson for being frustrated right there. He had every right to be upset for their officiating calls. I don't understand why some of their officiating calls happened the way they did. I think it was a bad decision on their part. They made those kind of officiating calls for Kyle Larson to be getting set in the back. Yes, Kyle Larson does have a position where he should know that stuff, but at the same token, in the same time, you have to understand Kyle Larson's frustration. He's running two races in the same, he's running two different classes, and the only driver who was at that event that was running two separate classes for the World of Outlaws. And you look at the other series that are profiting right now, and you look at how bad the late models is doing, and they were not even able to get a full field for the late model event, which just shows right now the late models are not doing really good at the moment. And it's frustrating to see as a fan when your guy that you're rooting for wants to do really, really well and had a shot to win and couldn't get an opportunity to win. You can understand that frustration of Kyle Larson, and it's very understandable why Kyle Larson was frustrated by that, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about late start times. Now, Jeff Gluck wrote an article out, I think Sunday, right after the Cup Series race was pretty much postponed, talking about the late start time situation. One thing interesting in that article that was released was what Brian Herbst said. Brian Herbst says that it's favorable for later start times when it comes to that. He doesn't care really. I don't know if it said it didn't care, but basically said that it's favorable to have it, and really doesn't matter if you do have a couple races that are unfortunately postponed to rain. I want to say this. This is my opinion on the late start time situation, because here's the big problem with what Brian Herbst said here. Dover does not have lights. And the fact that Dover does not have lights, why are we starting races at 3 p.m. Eastern with a track that doesn't have lights? If you would have started the race at noon Eastern, ladies and gentlemen, if you started a race at noon Eastern, you would have been able to get the full race in, and you would not have any problems of having to postpone this race or got almost a whole entire race in. I would rather get majority of the race in because this really affects the fans when you do have these late start times. And we generally have been lucky this season, when it comes to rain. We've been very lucky that this is the first race that was generally postponed to the next day. But this is something that absolutely I don't generally understand why. We have these late start times at tracks that do not have lights. Dover doesn't have lights. Okay, so make the start time earlier in the day. Make it noon Eastern or 1 Eastern, because if you start the race then, you get the race in, and you still had great attendance, which is unfortunate for the fans, because attendance for this year was really, really awesome, and the race is great. But I just do not understand what Brian is going through Brian Herp's mind when you basically have races that are postponed. This is something that really should have been solid out. I don't understand why basically they just decided to do this, because it was really, really frustrating for the fans, and I understand why fans are really, really frustrated about it. And can we please, for tracks that do not have lights, start the races at noon Eastern, please? Can we start doing that going forward? I think a lot of fans will be really, really appreciative of that. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about attendance for the NASCAR Cup Series. As there was an article that was written, I think, by Nate Ryan or Dustin Long that NBC released, and it was about how attendance has been increasing in NASCAR this season. And it's absolutely factual. Attendance this year at many races here, I've noticed this too, is attendance for 2022 has absolutely been up in major areas. Talladega saw their largest crowd they've had since 2017 in many, many years. Bristol had their largest crowd since 2017 for the spring race. Martinsville had their largest crowd in nearly 7 or 8 years, and since 2015. Atlanta had its largest crowd in a very, very long time. Phoenix had a sellout crowd, and of course the Daytona 500 sold out the quickest it's ever sold out. And Dover had probably the largest crowd they've ever had in 10 years. It's been unconfirmed if that is the case, but their crowd was basically insanely up this year. And I think there's a lot of factors and really big contributing factors to why attendance is rapidly going up this year in the NASCAR Cup Series. One, I think the TV ratings going up is a major factor that people are seeing the racing and they're going out to it. Number two, another big factor is the racing's good this year. You look at how good the racing generally has been this year and how many fans are enjoying it. I've only seen one race this year where I've generally hated. That just shows how great this car has been. A race at Dover, at a track that hasn't produced the best racing, was one of the best races I've seen at Dover in such a long time. And I think it just shows a lot of things. You've seen a lot of good racing this year, and it's been so fun to watch as a fan. I think that's why attendance is going up this year. And I'm intrigued to see what the rest of the year is. Now, we do have an economy that's kind of dwindling, and I do think the economy is going to shrink. So that's one of the things that we're going to have to watch throughout the season. But I think it's amazing to see that attendance right now is up the way it is. And I think it's great for the sport when you do have attendance that is going through the roof and attendance that is getting in the right direction. I think it's something that's really, really awesome. And again, I'm very happy to see that attendance right now is going up in the Cup Series right now. I think attendance being up in the Cup Series right now is a major step in the right direction for the sport. So I think it's awesome, and I'm glad to see that attendance continues to go up in the NASCAR Cup Series. I think it's great for the sport. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Ross Chastain and Martin Truex Jr. Now, we're going to be talking about Martin Truex Jr. later in this episode, but on the last lap of the race near the end, Ross Chastain and Martin Truex Jr. were battling for third position in the race. On the last lap, Ross Chastain crowded up Martin Truex Jr., and Martin Truex Jr. ran into the back of Ross Chastain and spun out on the last lap and finished 12th. After the race, Martin Truex Jr. was very unhappy, and they had a discussion. It did not really escalate. It really was not any pushing or shoving. It just that they were talking after the race. It seemed like a really respectful conversation, but also seemed like the Truex was absolutely frustrated and upset. Martin Truex Jr. throughout this race was complaining about the one car. He was complaining throughout the race about mirror driving. We know that Martin Truex Jr. is not a fan of aggressive driving. And Ross Chastain is one of the most aggressive drivers. Now, Ross Chastain did respond and basically said exactly what I'm saying here, is they basically crowded him up the track, and he understands why Martin Truex Jr. was a little bit frustrated. I think y'all said why Martin Truex Jr. is frustrated. And I also think these drivers are frustrated by the fact that Ross Chastain is running as good as he is. Ross Chastain has 7 top 5s, most of anybody this season, is having one of the best, is having a career season up this point. Regardless of what series he goes to, he's having a career year. He's been better than his Truck Series years, even his Xfinity Series career that he had a couple years ago as well. And that's one thing about Ross Chastain. He's a very aggressive driver. And these guys that are not the most aggressive do not like aggressive drivers. And it's very understandable there. Will we see these two continue to have issues going forward throughout this year? That's one thing we're going to have to watch. But I'll say this, I don't think we're going to see any more problems between these two drivers. I think that we'll see tensions not really spill between them. I don't think we'll see any more issues between these two. I think that unless maybe down the road we do see him, because I think Truex was going to improve and be a championship contender down the road. But I do think that right now maybe we'll see more tension down the road. But again, I don't know right now. We'll see. Because Truex is the guy that's kind of all talk, and he really doesn't walk the walk when it comes to what he's going to say. So we'll see what happens if we see more tensions between these two. But honestly, I don't think we're going to see any more problems with these two going forward down the next couple of years, to be honest with you. Real rest this year, actually. I don't know why I say the next couple of years, but I don't think we'll see any more issues between these two going forward, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Fox Sports booth for this weekend at Darlington, because we have a throwback weekend, of course, at Darlington, and it's going to be a throwback for the Fox Sports booth. Now, it's not going to be the Fox Sports booth that everybody wanted, but you're going to have Hall of Famers that are going to be in the Fox Sports booth. Richard Petty, the 200-time winner of the NASCAR Cup Series, probably the greatest driver in NASCAR history, will be in the Fox Sports booth in stage number 1. In stage number 2, Bobby Labonte, 2000 NASCAR Cup Series champion, and of course, who already works at Fox Sports at the moment, will be in the Fox Sports booth in stage number 2. And on stage number 3, you're going to have Austin Bill from Dawsonville, Bill Elliott, up in the Fox Sports booth. Now, I think the best one on this list is going to be Bobby Labonte. Bobby Labonte does have a lot of TV experience. Richard Petty, I've heard him do commentary in the past in 1984, and let's just say his commentary was not overall the most impressive, but I think it's cool to bring Richard Petty up. I will say one thing that Fox has generally gotten right this year so far is who they've had in the commentary booth. I think that's one thing that they really have clearly done a great job on, is the fact that they've had an amazing commentary crew and a great group that's already been in the Fox this year. You've had guys like Matt Kenseth in the booth, who's not going to be back in the booth this year. He's confirmed he's not going to be back. You've had Tony Stewart in the booth, who's done an amazing job this year. Larry McReynolds, who I think should be a great fixture. Dale Jr., who's did amazing. It's like a unicorn. He's the best commentator in NASCAR currently today. And I will say this is a hot take, this generation's Benny Parsons. That's one thing about the booth this year that I think has been so fun for Fox. I think Fox generally improved their coverage this year over the last couple weeks. I think they kind of went back a little bit down step this week after 2 really strong broadcasts. But I will say one thing that I will say Fox has gotten right this year is a rotation. I love it. They're doing a different rotation. I wish it was Larry McReynolds, Darrell Waltrip, because I think that would have been a really cool thing to bring all 3 of those guys back and take Clint Bowyer out for a week. But Fox really wants to keep Clint Bowyer in the booth, and I understand why they want to do it. So I love what Fox is doing right here, bringing different people in, and I think it's awesome to see that we'll see Richard Petty, Bobby Labonte, and Billy in the Fox Sports booth. I think that's really, really awesome. Glad to see that he'll be in the Fox Sports booth here later season. Really awesome seeing those guys here this weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Noah Gragson. As Noah Gragson said on Saturday after the Xfinity Series race, after he did win the Dasher Catch, he does say that he hopes Cup teams evaluating him look more at his current Xfinity Series votes than his select Cup Series starts, whereas Cup Series starts have not been that impressive this season. But in the Xfinity Series, he's been running really, really well. You look at Noah Gragson this season. Noah Gragson is a championship contender. He's got 2 wins this year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, those coming at Phoenix and Talladega, and is in the top 3 currently in the points. I think he's either 2nd or 3rd in the points right now. I'm not entirely sure, but he's been up front all season long and just picked up another top 5 finish. Noah Gragson is getting to that point, though, is when will he make that jump up to the Cup Series? He's been in the NASCAR Xfinity Series now for 4 seasons. This is his 4th NASCAR Xfinity Series season, and he's around 24, 25 years old. So the big question for Noah Gragson is how much longer is he really going to race in the NASCAR Xfinity Series? Because like I said, he's getting up a little up there to the point is that when will it happen? Now, I think that he's right at the age where I think he could make that jump up. The big question right now is what team is he going to go to if it happens? Do you have Kyle Grayson? That is a very big possibility who he's driving for currently at the moment, and it would not surprise if Kyle Racing does open up a 3rd team. And if that's the case, I can see Noah Gragson being a candidate. But you also do have to consider Daniel Hemrick as well, who could be a candidate for that, who's driven for the team for a few races and has had a couple good runs in the 16 car as well, while Noah Gragson has struggled. The other big possibility for Noah Gragson, if he's going to want to make that jump up to the Cup Series, is, of course, Junior Motorsports. Junior Motorsports has been rumored through the grapevine for a while now. They've been wanting to make the jump up to the Cup Series, and they're still evaluating a major possibility to make that jump up to the Cup Series, but they needed funds to have a charter, and there's a lot of talk around the charters right now that it's going to be $15 million to get a charter in the Cup Series, so it's going to be a lot of money for them to make that jump, but Junior Motorsports is trying to seek a charter to make that jump up. I think if Noah Gragson does make the jump up to the Cup Series next year, I think it will be with Junior Motorsports. I think if Junior Motorsports makes that jump, of course. If not, I don't know if Noah Gragson makes that jump. I just don't know. I think Call would be a great option. He does have sponsorship and funding, but does Noah Gragson want to make it up with Junior Motorsports because he's been with the team for many years, or does he want to make that jump up with another organization like Call Racing? That's one thing we'll have to wait and see. But I do hope if Noah Gragson makes the jump up in the Cup Series, I hope it is really with Junior Motorsports. I think it would be awesome if Junior Motorsports made the jump. I really do hope it happens, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kyle Busch. Now, Kyle Busch came into the media center here on Saturday and was basically wearing a shirt that says clickbait. He said basically in the media center that his comments were taken out of context, says that there were some talks with Joe Gibbs Racing, but did not elaborate. I want to kind of say something, really say something. Kyle Busch, I want to say this to you, dude. I don't know if you watch the videos now, you probably do not. But your comments were not taken out of context. You basically made short, sweet comments after and basically made people kind of think, and media reporters think. You kind of brought those short comments, and basically it was kind of on you. You should have basically a little bit elaborated more on what you said. You should have said, we're having discussions. I'm just a little frustrated. We've not gotten that far in the comments. And you got a lot of people that are frustrated, like David Wilson, and Joe Gibbs basically said that he's going to be, wants him to come back next year. But Kyle Busch, he kind of caused that situation. But I do love Kyle Busch's personality, though, so I'm not really mad about it. It's just he kind of caused himself to get into this media storm where now there's a lot of conversation on if he's going to return to Joe Gibbs Racing. I just think, though, he has a right to be frustrated, though, because he is a two-time NASCAR Cup Series champion and is having his best season since 2019. Look at his stats. He has a win this year up to this point so far. He's at 7 top 10s, I think, at this point this year, 7 or 8 top 10s this year, and has the best average finish over the last 5 races with the 5.4. So why is he not potentially coming back? Well, you think about the fact that he does not have a sponsor currently at the moment for 2023 at this moment. Now that we've talked about this on the channel, there has been some talk behind the scenes about him trying to get a sponsor. I think that he will return to Joe Gibbs Racing. I don't think that's a big problem, but what sponsor is going to jump up and sponsor him? I think, of course, you have sponsors like Menards. We've seen Kyle Busch in Menards commercials. Menards is a big possibility. But there's also a big possibility that a company like Stanley or DeWalt, who work with Joe Gibbs Racing, would be able to work with them. Also, Rowdy Energy, you got to think about that. That's a company that he owns. That could be a big possibility for him to jump up and run with him. He does, because Rowdy Energy does have affiliation with Kyle Busch in the Truck Series when he runs. That would be a great sponsor to have. I think the big question is, will he continue to drive? Again, the big question is will that sponsor come soon? So I think it will happen. The big question is, what sponsor is going to be willing to work with him? Because Kyle Busch is not going anywhere. I don't think he's going anywhere, regardless of what team he drives for. I don't see Kyle Busch going anywhere anytime soon. Kyle Busch is one of the greatest NASCAR drivers of all time, and I think he is one of the top 2 best drivers currently racing in the Cup Series. And I think it's between him and the other Kyle Larson right now. But I think Joe Gibbs Racing would be foolish to get rid of Kyle Busch. I think Joe Gibbs really wants to keep Kyle Busch. He's been their most successful driver, and they've also got a great development program, because if Kyle Busch does leave Joe Gibbs Racing, which I don't think he's going to, but if he does leave Joe Gibbs Racing, that also affects development for the team. I know some people bring up Stewart-Haas Racing for a potential possibility for him to go there, but I don't see him going to Stewart-Haas Racing. I don't see him leaving Joe Gibbs Racing, but if he does leave Joe Gibbs Racing, he does become a free agent, he is going to be the biggest free agent in many, many years. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens in regards to what Kyle Busch does. But again, I don't see Kyle Busch leaving Joe Gibbs Racing after this year, but we're going to have to wait and see what happens, see what Kyle Busch does after the 2022 season. But again, I think Kyle Busch does return to Joe Gibbs Racing, and I think he finds a sponsor, and I think the sponsor is going to be Menards. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Erik Jones. Now, Erik Jones was being interviewed before the NASCAR Cup Series race happened at Dover on Sunday, or at Saturday, I should say. And Erik Jones says that he's had initial talks with Petty GMS about returning next year, and he's happy there, but figures it will be a few more months before anything would get done with petty GMS Motorsports. Erik Jones has definitely been one of the biggest surprises so far this season. He is now currently in the NASCAR Cup Series Plus by around 5 or 10 points. And you compare where when it was RPM last year, he was trying to click off a top 20 points finish where he finished 22nd or 23rd in the points. But Erik Jones is having a major rebound season, a big bounce back year, and a big improvement year compared to last year. And I think there's a big factor to that. One, Erik Jones has definitely been really improving this year and has been doing really good. And of course, there's other major factors for him as well, where he is a really talented driver who was driving for Joe Gibbs Racing, but unfortunately got shafted. But I will say it really wasn't his fault that his big struggles. But the big question is for him to return to this team is going to be funding. Will he have the funding to continue? Now, right now for Erik Jones, he does have Focus Factor that's been sponsoring for a majority of the season. And sponsorship for Erik Jones hasn't been a big issue. This is the first time Erik Jones has had a major sponsor that has been backing him, and Focus Factor has been backing him for pretty much the whole entire season. I think they're sponsored for 26 races this year. By the way, that paint scheme's absolutely look incredible on the racetrack. I think it's looked absolutely amazing. But if you're petty GMS Motorsports or petty GMS Racing, you would be foolish to get rid of Erik Jones. I think we'd be foolish to get rid of him because he's been your best driver in years. This is the first time that I've seen the 43 car be this competitive, guys, in nearly a decade, really since Erik got on roll in 2014 or 2015. He hasn't been this 43, hasn't been this good since Erik on rolls in the car. And honestly, probably even before that, we haven't seen a 43 car be this competitive. So if I'm petty GMS Motorsports right now, I do not get rid of Erik Jones. I keep him in the teams. I think Erik Jones absolutely deserves to continue driving for this team, and I think it would be stupid for them to get rid of him. I think he will return to the team, because I think if petty GMS Motorsports smart, I think they will return him to the team. But I think that's one thing for the future is, do they keep him in the team? That's one thing we're going to have to watch and see throughout the silly season, because silly season and talks are beginning to heat up for 2022. And I think it's very big possible he could also leave the team. There's a lot of other options. Stewart-Haas Racing, of course, could be an option for him if he doesn't return. But I think that we're going to see Erik Jones return to petty GMS. I think they'd be foolish to get rid of him. I think he will return to the team. Again, we're going to have to wait and see what happens in regards to that. But I think Erik Jones will return to petty GMS next year. I think he's a good enough driver to get it done. I think he's a good enough driver. I know his future, there's a little uncertain questions around Erik Jones because sponsorship has been an issue for him. But I don't see Erik Jones leaving petty GMS. He's such a good driver. He knows what he's doing, and I think he will return to petty GMS Motorsports in the 2023 season. I think he's going to return. He's got that Focus Factor sponsorship. I know that sponsorship has been a little sketchy. I know some people were questioning if that will continue, but he's had it all year. We haven't heard any funding issues with that. I may have jinxed it now, but I think that Erik Jones will return to petty GMS Motorsports in 2023. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kyle Larson and Denny Hamlin. Now, Kyle Larson was asked by the media about Denny Hamlin's tweet this past week. He basically responded to the tweet on Saturday by the media, because remember, we'll talk about this for a second. Denny Hamlin made out a tweet against Kyle Larson after what happened at Talladega. On the last lap of the Talladega race, Kyle Larson threw a really bad block on Kurt Busch, who had a huge run, and Kurt Busch and Bubba Wallace ended up both crashing. Both, of course, drivers for Denny Hamlin's organization at 2311 Racing. Denny Hamlin was not very happy. I don't think was really happy. And he basically showed the meme of that Asian girl who basically shifted across a bunch of lanes and edited. It wasn't really offensive to me, but some people got offended by it. And because of the tweet, Denny Hamlin took the tweet down and was required to start sensitivity training before the week ended that last week. Now, Kyle Larson, like I mentioned, responded to the tweet. He says he was not personally offended by it, but he understands people can be offended by it as well. Now, Denny Hamlin also later responded to this when he was asked, and he says that he respects NASCAR's order after his tweet earlier this week. He felt like maybe it had been a little bit too far, and basically said that he was not dull, it was just a joke, but he understands that people can also get offended by it as well. Here's my 2 cents on the situation with Kyle Larson and Denny Hamlin when it comes to that tweet. Kyle Larson, I think, actually is really smart at saying this. He says he wasn't personally offended by the tweet, but he understands why people can be offended by it. To me, though, I felt like the joke was absolutely harmless. It really wasn't that. To me, it really wasn't offensive of a joke. I didn't think it was personally offensive. I personally think that maybe taking the tweet down was a really smart thing. But I also think Kyle Larson's all saying here, maybe should have sent it to the friend group because he and Denny Hamlin are really good friends. One thing that people need to realize is that Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson are really good friends. And would, honestly, Denny Hamlin make that kind of joke against Kyle Larson if they were not good friends? No, I don't think Denny Hamlin would have. I think Denny knows that Kyle Larson are good friends. And even responded on his tweet before they got taken it down. He basically said that he knows that Larson and Hamlin wrecked Larson, so he understands that it was just a friendly banter and a joke. In my opinion, I don't think it was that offensive. And I'll say most people, when Denny Hamlin was announced he had to go to sensitivity training, their reaction was honestly negative toward NASCAR, forcing Denny Hamlin to go to sensitivity training. I've seen some people who have been really, really critical when it comes to so many things. They're basically critical of NASCAR for sending him to sensitivity training for a simple joke, and I absolutely agree that he should not have gone to sensitivity training. I think that Tim taking the tweet down was really smart and apologizing for the tweet. I think so far as it should have gotten, I think NASCAR went too far with it, and he should not have been required to go to sensitivity training, but I do appreciate Denny Hamlin at least apologize for it, but I will say Denny Hamlin at least respecting NASCAR for the tweet. I think he knows that if he says something negative, he could get fined for it. But I do understand Denny Hamlin saying what he had to say and understands the NASCAR's rules and regulations. To me, though, in my opinion, I think Kyle Larson he's not a person offended. So why I don't understand people get offended. Now, I saw some Asian people that were basically offended by the tweet, and I also saw quite a few Asian people that were not offended by the tweet. So to me, in my honest opinion, I don't really understand why he really had to go to sensitive training when a driver like Larson isn't offended by it, really was not personally offended by the tweet. We really shouldn't be sending Denny Hamlin to sensitivity training. I really don't think he should have been sent to sensitivity training. I think that was a little bit too far and a little bit too excessive, but it is NASCAR decision. We have to respect NASCAR decision, and if NASCAR says that he is required to go to sensitivity training, so we have to respect that and support that, and it is NASCAR decision. I think it's a little frustrating they made that decision to go there. I don't think he should have been required to go to sensitivity training. I think NASCAR pushed a button right there, but again, it's NASCAR decision. We do have to respect it. So Denny Hamlin probably began his sensitivity training. We'll wait and see what happens if anything comes for it, but it looks like he began his sensitivity training because he was going to probably get penalized or sat down if he did not go to sensitivity training. So hopefully Denny Hamlin learns, and we'll see what happens going forward for Denny Hamlin. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Martin Truex Jr. Now, there's been a lot of talk about Martin Truex Jr.'s future and if Martin Truex Jr. is going to continue to race in the NASCAR Cup Series after this season or not. Now, Bob Pockrass reported basically this past week, he did basically report that Martin Truex Jr. does have several weeks to decide if he wants to return and basically wants to return to the team. He says he really likes racing the car, but he does want to continue racing. Now, from his body language, he did not really sound convincing that he really is having a fun time with his car, but also Martin Truex Jr. does have a very calm demeanor in himself. So sometimes you can't tell. Sometimes body language doesn't always tell the story. Sometimes you have some calm drivers who don't really show their demeanor. Now, Martin Truex Jr. is in a contract year right now through 2022. And Joe Gibbs Racing, it's unclear what the team's going to look like. We talked already about Kyle Busch on today's video. But Martin Truex Jr., it's unclear if he's going to return after this season. And Martin Truex Jr. definitely is getting up there in age. He is 41 years old right now. He's one of the oldest NASCAR Cup Series drivers. And really, he said that if he wasn't enjoying the car, he was probably going to retire at the end of the season. Now, there's also a very big possibility that he could retire after 2023. And there's a big possibility that this next year could be his last year. But I think this could honestly be his last year. But a lot of people think he's having a bad year, and you look at where he's in the standings. He's 7th in the points right now. He's having a pretty solid year. He's around Kyle Larson in the points. He's around Ross Chastain in the points. But look how good Ross Chastain has been. He's ahead of him in the points. He's barely behind him. He's had a Joey Logano in the points, so I think he's been better than Martin Truex Jr. this year. And I think it just shows that Truex really wants to get it done, and he just wants to win a race. I think if Truex does not win a race this year, though, there's a very big possibility happens, but also a big possibility he does get a win. If he doesn't win a race and really doesn't contend for a championship this year, I really think there's a very big possibility that he does end up retiring. So I think it's a very big possibility that he could retire. But if he does retire, man, it feels like it's going to be too soon. But he has been in the Cup Series for a very, very long time. He made his NASCAR Cup Series debut 18 years ago in 2004. And his first full-time season came in 2006. We forget that Truex Jr. has been in the Cup Series for a very, very long time. He's accomplished a lot. He's won the Cup Series championship. He's won the Coke 600. He's won the Southern 500. He's won a lot of major events throughout his career. The only thing, of course, he needs to do is win a super speed race to really get it done, or win the Daytona 500 to really complete his career. But he is one of the oldest Cup Series drivers. Now, big question around Truex Jr. is, if he does retire, who's going to replace him? Well, I think that it's very obvious that who will end up replacing him, but I don't know if this guy will be ready to make that jump. We're talking about Ty Gibbs. Ty Gibbs currently drives at 54 for Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Of course, the grandson of Joe Gibbs Racing, and has already won 3 races this year, and is currently second in the points, just barely right now behind AJ Allmendinger in the points right now in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. But one thing I'm worried about for Ty Gibbs is the emotional pressure. And we already know that a lot of drivers do not like Ty Gibbs in the Xfinity Series. And he has a major reputation where he races drivers very, very aggressively. And really, especially after what happened in Martinsville, a lot of drivers look at that negatively, including drivers in the Cup Series probably saw what happened and are just acting like, what are you doing, Ty? Ty is definitely a very talented driver, but I think if I was smart, if I was Joe Gibbs Racing, I'd keep him down there. But if Truex Jr. decides to retire after this year, and like I said, there's a very big possibility that does happen where he does retire after next year, you got to look at Ty Gibbs to make that jump. You also do have Brandon Jones, who could be a big opportunity to take over that 19. But honestly, if I had to go between Ty Gibbs and Brandon Jones to make that jump, I would trust Ty Gibbs more than Brandon Jones. But again, I would be worried if Ty made that jump if he'd be like Joey Logano. We saw how good Joey Logano was in the NASCAR Xfinity Series 2008 and made that jump up the Cup. Yes, he got that win, but he struggled. And I just think that another year in Xfinity would be great for Ty. But again, I don't know what's going to happen. So again, it's unclear if Truex Jr. is going to return next year. It's a very big possibility. This could be his last year in the Cup Series. His future really is uncertain. There's a lot of questions around if Truex Jr. is going to return after the season. So we'll wait and see what happens when it comes to that. But I think, again, there's a very big possibility this could be Truex Jr.'s final season in the NASCAR Cup Series. So, anyway, that's today's NASCAR and Motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, as for me on page as well. Let's get your blow over that and comment your thoughts on today's video. Do you think that this will be Truex Jr.'s final season in the NASCAR Cup Series or not, or do you think next year he'll return? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the other stories we discussed here today on the channel? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, we're going to be having race picks for the Darlington Throwback weekend. And then the next day, I'm not sure if it will be a news video or we'll be looking at the Darlington Throwback schemes. Check up your eye, keep your notifications on my channel, because I've got a lot of stuff that's coming here in the future. I also will eventually get that 2024 NASCAR Cup Series driver lineup predictions video probably out here later in the next couple weeks. I'm not entirely sure when that will happen, but I've got some other content that's coming soon on the channel. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time. So I got awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.